Hello, and welcome to the UAN screencast recording for UAN entity budgetary and fiscal management reports. Which UAN reports should I request? I'm Carl Cardwell, a project accountant with the Uniform Accounting Network, division of the Auditor of State's Office, which supports the Uniform Accounting Network fiscal management system. So, as an overview, what is the purpose of this session? Your UAN accounting system can provide fiscal and budgetary reports about your entity that can assist in its regular management. This session reviews a base set of reports that can assist clerks and fiscal officers determining what reports to present to those charged with managing an entity, such as trustees, council members, mayors, administrators, department heads, board members, police, fire and EMS chiefs, etc., and so on. What this session will not be about. This session will not teach UAN, accounting, budgeting, or year-end financial reporting. At various times of the year, we will be offering live sessions regarding those issues, as well as providing on the UAN Link website recordings of previous sessions that do review that information. Now, let's discuss report access. UAN provides multi-user, multi-role functionality. So what does this mean? If desirable, entity management can have access to UAN and be limited to only view reports. The fiscal officer can set up separate users with separate roles, such as a role for reports only, so that others can have access to those reports on an as-needed and as-desired basis. It does require access to the UAN computer if you're accessing it locally, and or high-speed internet access for the UAN computer so that other computers can connect to it. Keep in mind that all transactions are tracked in UAN and also tracked based upon individual users. Now, getting to the basis of the UAN reporting structure, entity management will have questions. Questions regarding the entity that can be answered through reports in UAN, such as the fund cash, big picture position, where am I now? How much I have received through the revenue receipt position. How much have I spent through the appropriation expenditure position? What have I planned or budgeted to spend through the planning and organizing position? And how am I doing as of right now? And what should I be doing for the future, or the managing and controlling position? Now, those questions can be answered through various reports in UAN. Where am I now? Through the fund stats and cash summary by fund report. How much have I received? By using the revenue status report. How much have I spent? Using the appropriation status report. What have I planned to spend? Using the purchase order status report. Figuring out how I'm doing through the bank reconciliation, vendor payee payment register, and the vendor payee receipt register, which also answers the question, where am I now? As shown previously, there are a set of reports in UAN that can be used and accessed on a regular basis as part of a review cycle, such as before the first meeting every month, which will help you to answer questions that can be described with the key phrase, where am I now? These reports provide a picture of where I'm at a particular point in time in the past or currently relative to the information represented on the report. You can call these snapshots or at-a-glance reports. Now, there are approximately 200 various reports available in UAN, so why these few? Well, through a poll here within UAN, LGS, Local Government Services, Financial Audit, and from other experienced visiting clerks, those that were polled as to which reports would be the most helpful mentioned that these reports were consistently mentioned. Reports such as the transaction log, which provides you hundreds of pages of detailed information regarding every transaction entry made in UAN, provide great information. However, with all that you do within your entity and outside of it within various activities. We really don't need that level of detail on a regular basis. Important to remember is that you'll want to be consistent in any comparison, such as month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, or within period contexts, such as a month as a part of a year. These two kind of go hand in hand because it suggests that you review these reports as part of a monthly cycle. As we review them, you will want to be consistent within those period comparisons. You'll want to review for both expected and unplanned events, as well as determine about planning for the future what-if events. Expected events such as those that you've already planned for, such as the monthly insurance payment, property tax receipts from the county, the paying of employees, or paying of vendors, etc. Unplanned events. You ran out of road salt. You need to get the flat tire fixed on the police car. There was a fire in the bathroom at the hall, and so on. You also want to take a look to help determine for future events, such as what if we got a new tractor or fire truck? What if we want to expand the building? What if we want to get a new policeman? How will we be able to fit that in based upon the information that we see now? Looking at the first report, determined by the position of where am I now? The fund status report. This report shows the basic cash position, which shows your entity funds, their number and description, a fund percentage of total pooled, an overall fund balance per fund, amount of investments if they are non-pooled, amount in checking and pooled investment. You'd subtract out pooled investments, and subtract out secondary accounts, and it will show you your available primary checking balance. So let's take a look at what that looks like exactly and how we would get there. So, using the UAN application, if we go to Accounting, Reports and Statements, and Fund Reports, we can then access the Fund Status Report. Now I have one prepared here as of 2/29/2016, which shows, as we discussed, the fund number, the fund names, the percentage of the total pooled. As you can see, it's how that particular fund makes up the total whole. As you can see, the general fund makes up 64% of the whole. The fund balance for the general fund, as well as the representation of that in checking and pooled investments. I can then subtract out my pooled investments and my secondary checking accounts to get to the available current primary checking balance. Moving on to the next report, which also answers the where am I now position, the cash summary by fund report, which can be accessed through the Uniform Accounting Network application by going to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Fund Reports, and Cash Summary by Fund. And I have one prepared here, in which you can see the fund number, the balance information, the adjustments, any revenues that were received against that fund, transfers in and advances in, transfers out and advances out, as well as expenditures, fund balance and the non-pooled balance and the pooled balance. So what does this simply mean? This shows you what you've actually received, what you've actually spent, any special transactions such as advances or transfers, to get you to what your current cash and investment position is. Now this report is important because it's close to a summary level income statement that would be viewed in other accounting for other accounting purposes. So at a glance, I can get expanded cash picture and how it fits in with the transactions that have already taken place within my entity. Now the revenue and receipt position answers the question, how much have I received through the revenue status report? This report shows a snapshot of receipt information, such as the amount planned as a final budget for each code, which is revenue, the amount of money collected so far, which is receipts, the the amount left to potentially receive, and the percentage of that received. And in other reports, we can actually order the report by the amount actually received by revenue type. It's an alternative form of the report so you can see how your money is being received. So we would access that report in UAN by going to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Revenue Reports, and Revenue Status. And here I have the Revenue Status Report, which shows the account codes, such as general property tax, and I've received 0 against that account code. And I have budgeted $140,000. Now, for the cable franchise fees account code, 1,303,0000, I budgeted $51,500. I've actually receipted $12,545.47, which my year-to-date received is almost a quarter for that year already. So we can look at the amount budgeted, the amount received, as well as the budget balance available as anticipated for the rest of the year. Now looking at the appropriation expenditure position, which is answered by the question, how much have I spent, through the appropriation status report. The report shows how much was spent at a glance, reflecting the carry forward encumbrance for prior year and adjustments, the amount authorized and planned in the budget to spend, the amount currently in encumbrances through purchase order and blanket certificates, plus that which has already been spent as expenditures, an amount actually spent by appropriation type. Report is available in an alternative format to see another way of how entity money is spent. You'll review the unencumbered balance and year-to-date percentage of expenditures. And we'll want to consider, why is there a cash balance on the page? And that's to compare budgetary or fund level reporting, which is the appropriation side, to fiscal or cash position, which is how much money do I actually have to be able to spend versus my appropriations. So we would get to the appropriation status report in UAN by going to Accounting, Reports and Statements, and Appropriation Reports, and Appropriation Status. I have one prepared here. And I can see that, for instance, I had reserved for encumbrances at the beginning of the year for salaries for withholdings that were from the previous year, some monies, as well as the monies that were actually paid currently against those withholdings through the reserve for encumbrance adjustment. I have a final appropriation, which is what my permanent appropriation is currently for the year, my current reserve for encumbrances, my year-to-date expenditures, which is what I've actually spent thus far, and what I have available as a balance. And as mentioned, if we look at the cash balance at my cash position, this will help me determine how to best utilize my monies available in case I'm in a cash crunch. So I can determine, whereas I may have $1 million in appropriations, but if I only have $1 in cash, I can only spend $1. Now looking at the planning or organizing position, which is answered by the question, what have I planned or budgeted to spend, we can utilize the purchase order blanket certificate status report. This report provides a current status of planned spending, which is the spending authorized by creating purchase orders and blanket certificates. It will show you the PO or BC number and type, the issue and transaction date, the vendor, the status of the purchase order, and the appropriation codes used, as well as the account descriptions, the amount encumbered, which is the amount that the purchase order was created for, the amount already charged against the appropriation code as an expenditure, any amount adjusted, which is to reduce the purchase order blanket certificate amount, and the amount overspent if a compliance override was issued, which allowed the purchase order to be overspent, as well as remaining authorized amounts available to create a payment. The purchase order listing report is the same report, but without account code information. So let's take a look at that. In the Uniform Accounting Network, we would go to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Purchase Order Reports, and I will select Purchase Order Status, but I also have the Purchase Order Listing Report available. And as mentioned, I can see the purchase orders that are available, as well as the account codes that are utilized against those purchase orders and blanket certificates. Now, you may ask, where are my salary and benefit codes? Well, the report does not typically include direct account codes such as salary, wage, and benefits. Now, the Appropriation Status Report does have that information, which is indicated through the direct account codes, or the account codes with a D, which will also show the amount encumbered, which also is the amount of the current expenditures. Now, if we were to look at the purchase order listing report, we can see it's the same basic report, but without the account codes listed. Now that we have a few reports under our belt, we can then recap and look at this diagram, which is the question answered, and the reports and how they answer those questions. Because it's important to note that some of these reports will be used in conjunction with each other in order to answer the questions together, such as, what have I planned to spend for the purchase order status report that we just went over? The purchase order status report can be used with the appropriation status report to help give context to the what have I planned disposition, and also to provide context to the how am I doing position through the bank reconciliation and the payment and receipt register, such as how much have I received can be used with the fund status and cash summary by fund report in comparison and conjunction with the revenue status report to also provide context to each other. So the positions, as indicated by the diagram, it's important to note that we will often use the reports together to provide context and to provide a fuller picture into our position. Now we come to one of the most important reports in UAN, the bank reconciliation report. It's important because it answers the question, how am I doing, through the managing and controlling position function. This report shows how transactions posted in the UAN system within a month match, also known as reconciling, what has happened at the bank within the same month. On the report, we'll see on the UAN side some of the transactions that have occurred in the system, which is reflective of the cash balance, reflective of any receipts or payments entered during that period, any adjustments and other adjusting factors noted regarding any transactions. Now, keep in mind that items that affect the reconciliation temporarily, usually due to timing differences or recording errors, are other adjusting factors, but they should be known and reconcilable factors, such as if I make an entry within the next month, I correct for that other adjusting factor. And also on that report, I would then see the adjusted UAN balance. Regarding the bank side, I would see the bank balance as of the statement ending date, which would reflect and match the same period within UAN. Any receipts that are deposited in transits, any warrants or checks that are still outstanding payments, adjustment in UAN that haven't affected the bank yet, such as an OPERS withholding payment, any other adjusting factors. Again, these should be known and reconcilable factors, which then gives me the adjusted bank balance. Also on the report, I would see any notes. And you'll definitely want to review because there should be comments regarding any other adjusting factors. Any outstanding items as reports regarding payments, receipts, and or adjustments as necessary. And why is reviewing the bank reconciliation report important? Because it's the certification of funds through proper internal controls. Now, let's look at how we get to that report. It's printed out at the time the bank reconciliation is done. And we can get to it any time by going to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Bank Reconciliation Reports, and I can select it by month at any time as long as they have been previously completed. And here I have my bank reconciliation report, and we can see those items as mentioned on the slides, which is I have my prior UAN balance, and receipts, payments and adjustments as noted within UAN, any other adjusting factors. Then I also have my bank balance, which is per the statement, any deposit in transit or receipts recording UAN that have not hit the bank yet, any outstanding payments that have been recorded in UAN that have not hit the bank yet, any outstanding adjustments or other adjusting factors. Note that there is a signature line for governing board signatures for review purposes, as well as notation if there isn't any reports regarding things such as outstanding receipts or outstanding adjustments. I can also see my bank balances for each of the accounts that I have. In here I have the primary checking, a money market or secondary account, as well as various investments, including a money market investment, and several CDs, as well as Star Ohio. Each of those balances are reconciled on a monthly basis. Any outstanding payments or checks that have been issued but have not hit the bank yet. Also great use is the actual cleared payments, which are actual payments that were cleared against the bank reconciliation, as noted also within the bank statement. Any cleared receipts, again as noted from what's recorded in UAN as compared to the bank statement. So again, it's important to review the bank reconciliation report for certification of funds and proper internal controls for managing and controlling your organization. Also, within the how am I doing position within the managing and controlling, we have the vendor payee payment register and the vendor payee receipt register. Now these reports show how much have been paid out to who and when by the date posted, amount charged to a specific account code, and it will show any adjustments, as well as for the receipt register, it will show how much was received for whom and when by the date posted, amount received against a specific account code, and it will show any adjustments. So how come this is used in conjunction with the bank reconciliation report? Because this easily ties transactions that are recorded within UAN based upon transactions and entries to your bank reconciliation. Let's see how that works. If we look at, by going into General, Reports and Statements, Vendor Payee Reports, I can then access the Vendor Payee Payment and Receipt Registers. And when I look at the report, the very first one I see, because I ran this report according to the same period in which I ran the reconciliation for February, I had a check which cleared against the bank reconciliation for February to Amish Electric that shows the transaction date, the purchase order used, the payment or receipt number, in this case the check number, as well as the account code hit. So I have an immediate tying entry to the entries that correspond to the bank reconciliation. And looking at the vendor payee receipt report, I can see the same thing. I see that I had a receipt from the county auditor, a standard receipt to the 1,532,000 code that was cleared against this bank rec for $7,042. I also had a receipt from a funeral home for $1,050, which is probably a unusual event if I'm not really expecting this. So it allows me to review and have immediate answers to the questions that may be posed by the bank reconciliation report. And lastly, regarding reports, we want to regard some of the reports that we mentioned can be run in alternative ways. Why? Because these reports can be used by tying UAN fund management reports or budgetary reports that you use throughout the year to the UAN year-end financial reports or fiscal reports, which are statements based upon your cash position at the end of the year. Now, we already looked at the appropriation status and the revenue status reports, but those amounts can be run through a sorting, which would then allow us to see them by fund, program, and object code, as well as the revenue status report to be shown by revenue type. And then we also have management reports, which allow us to view some of the same information that we have looked at previously, but within the context of a fiscal or year-end financial report position. So if I go to the appropriation status report that we had already ran before, but here I have it sorted by fund, program, and object code. And if you note, salaries are now grouped. So now I have a tying entry to when run year to date with the statement information from the AFR or annual financial report for salaries, employee fringe benefits, supplies and materials, purchase services. You'll see these same groupings on the financial statements. Same thing regarding the revenue status report, where I would have the same groupings now within the context of what I would see reflected on the financial statements, which tie together my receipts for property and other local taxes, my receipts for license permits and fees, and intergovernmental receipts as well. Now, the fund summary reports are reached by going in UAN to accounting, reports and statements, and management reports. And I have my fund summary, revenue summary, and appropriation summary. And here, I can tie, similarly to what I may have seen before in the cash summary by fund report and fund status report and other reports. But here, it's pure cash according to fund. So I can see what my fund starting balance was, what my month-to-date revenue, year-to-date revenue, expenditures, and ending fund balance. What are my reserves for encumbrances or current purchase orders and blanket certificates, and what my current unencumbered fund balance is available to create new purchase orders and blanket certificates or for direct expenditures such as salary lines. I then can see my revenue summary, which ties as well according to the information that's presented on an annual financial report. So the same information that I can see reflected in a revenue status report through the revenue summary, I can see it restated within the context of an annual financial report. And again, same thing with the appropriation summary. As mentioned before, we see the salary, employee fringe benefit, purchase services, supplies, and materials. So again, it's the same information, but represented to help you to continue to make good decisions. In closing, to recap, we have some important questions which can be answered through UAN reporting. The Where Am I Now question for the fund cash big picture position through the fund status and cash summary by fund report. The How much have I received question through the revenue receipt position through the revenue status report. How much have I spent or the appropriation expenditure position through the appropriation status report, and what have I planned to spend through the purchase order status report through the planning and organizing position, and how am I doing through managing and controlling position through bank reconciliation, payment register, and receipt register. These are the reports that you will need to consider on a regular basis. The other reports mentioned for the management summary reports are useful for year-end basis, or if you'd like to take a look in a different way at your current financial position. But they aren't necessarily needed for regular management. Now, throughout the presentation, I've actually shown you through UAN how to get to the reports. You don't have to recall through the presentation how to get to them because I've included some information as to where to find the UAN reports. For instance, the Fund Status and Cash Summary by Fund report we reach by going to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Fund Reports. So in UAN, I would go to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Fund Reports, and I have the Fund Status Report as well as the Cash Summary by Fund report. And at the bottom left, I have the name of the path, which shows me where I'm at any given time in UAN, which corresponds to what is shown on the slide for Accounting, Reports and Statements, Fund Reports. Now, if there are any questions, please do not hesitate to contact us here at UAN Support. Please put what you've learned into practice. You can go back to your entity and run these reports, and you can review them yourself as a fiscal officer, and for those that are in management positions, review those in conjunction with your fiscal officer to get a better understanding together as to the reports and how they function within UAN and how can you utilize these reports better serve your entity in its management. We know that this is a lot of information, and you can review this presentation again at any given time as well as the slides, but the best recommendation that I can give is to go into UAN and put it into practice, print the reports, and review it for yourself. Thank you. We are the Uniform Accounting Network, and our phone number is 800-833-8261.